Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Jasmine Pinckney. I am the inclusion producer for the Southwest Creative Technology Network, and thank you for joining us on our talk with Sense with Data. We're going to be introducing and finding out more about that project and the panel a little later, but I'll start by describing myself. I'm a dual heritage woman. I've got big curly brown hair. I've got gold rimmed glasses, and today I'm wearing dangly golden earrings, and I'm sat in my newly cleaned bedroom. And I'm going to introduce also our wonderful BSL interpreter alongside us. So we've got Alice Quigley, who's on the left of me, I believe, and her pronouns are she and her. She is a white woman in her early 30s, and she's wearing a black t-shirt. She's brown hair, brown curly hair, and she's wearing black framed glasses, and she's sitting at a desk in front of a blue wall. So let's talk a little bit about what this session will be about. So we are excited to have a conversation with the team behind Sense with Data. And so that is a collection of 4 of the SWOCTIN Data Fellows. They are Natasha, Pete, Annie, and Alex, and they'll be introducing themselves just in a moment. Before we start, a little intro about Sense with Data. It brings together a collection of sensemakers, and they're seeking to start a discussion about how digital data affects communities and becomes a force for change. This is a result of a collaboration, and they're about asking questions, provoking discourse, and exploring the diversity of attitudes and approaches to data sense making. So I'm going to hand over now to Natasha, who will explain herself and a little bit more about the team.
Hi, I'm Natasha Nicholson. I'm a data fellow with SWOCTIN and partner in Charlick and Nicholson Architects. I'm a white woman. My pronouns are she, her. I have light brown, shortish curly hair. I'm wearing a grey top with an orange scarf, and behind me is a colour block background of yellow, ochre and grey. As a new talent data fellow, I've loved this 12-month journey of discovery, and it's opened my eyes and awakened my data senses. Increasingly, we live in data. Data is pivotal stuff for understanding the contemporary world and having effective agency within it. My data research is focused on data, democracy, and place. Coming from architecture, I'm drawn to the spatial, material, and structural aspects of data and data systems in placemaking. I'm looking at coastal communities, including Brixham in South Devon. Digital data is like a new material laid down over time, something to build with. I'm interested in how we can derive meaning from data and design tools to work with it. How data can turbocharge collective decision-making and change, not just through information, but by providing a structure, narrative, and a collective identity. The Data Fellowship has been great compost, growing ideas and connections, and this collaboration has taken that onto another level through the process of working together and challenging ideas from our different viewpoints. And we've made something to share, the sensewithdata.org website. I'll hand over to Pete.
Thanks, Natasha. My name is Pete Quinn Davis, and I'm a creative producer and program leader for MA Design at the University of Plymouth. Just a little bit about my description. I'm a white male wearing a black hoodie with a green and black top, a green cap, black framed glasses, and I'm sitting in my studio, which obviously is white. I've been using scanning data for about 8 years, mostly lens-based and using static contested kind of heritage objects as sources of inspiration. But my fellowship has focused on Lidar scanning, which is the non-lens based. It's just a laser. And that's using machine vision to record billions of precisely measured points to observe change in spatial and temporal scales, invisible to the human eye. I think probably these in turn can be explored from any moment in time at extreme detail. And as with all of the data fellows, this brief has been modified due to the restrictions on our lives, our practices and methods. But I have managed to kind of scale the focus, develop some interesting collaborations along the way, and develop some outcomes. And I have concentrated more on the environment, both from an artistic, creative perspective, but also from a kind of original cartographer or digital cartographer or geographer. And the result has been pretty extraordinary visually. And I kind of like to describe them as creative scientific geography at a rave. Sense with Data has been a great collaboration for me, like Natasha, and has extended a conversation with the broader issues and pivot points around data and its impacts. I have a deep interest in sense making as a collective experience. So applying my own ideas and practices to Sense with Data has helped me in clarifying and deep diving into the difficult and messy world of data. Now over to Alex.
Hi, so my name's Alex Hilson. My pronouns he, him, and yeah, I'm a data fellow with Swigton. So about me, I'm a white man wearing a pink t-shirt and with dark hair. So I started this fellowship kind of wanting to think about the tension between data pessimism and data optimism, right? When we work with data, there's loads of really exciting things that are interesting and transformative and change the way that we think about the world. But the organizations and with the most power don't always have our kind of interests at heart, right? And the way that we work with data kind of reinforces those power structures. It's one of the kind of primary changes in digital data is that it's sort of infinitely reproducible and can be moved into different contexts. How do we have confidence that we're doing good in the world when our work can be taken and reapplied in different ways, right? So how do we navigate that as people who work with data? When should we be pragmatic about that? And when should we be idealistic? What moral lines do we set in how we engage with data and with institutions? So I'm kind of thinking here about data that is kind of concrete in some way, that it has a kind of intuitive, understandable nature, maybe a clear parallel in the non-digital world, right? Not necessarily stuff that's highly personal or highly abstract about big platforms, but things that we might historically have worked with as being in the public commons, right? So how do we think about that as a collective and use that data for public good? And this collaboration was a chance for me to kind of explore and write about these tensions and learn from other perspectives about how they think about and how they work with data to try and find new frames that are helpful for working with data with confidence that we're doing something good for the world. So that's me.
Hi, I'm Annie Legg, co-founder of the cooperative Dot Project and a Swigton Data Fellow. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a white woman in my 40s with shoulder-length blonde hair tied in a ponytail today. I'm wearing glasses and a green jumper, sitting at a desk in my office at home with a blue wall and furniture behind me. At Dot Project, we work across the social sector as passionate co-creators, collaborators, and conveners. And we believe networks are the organisational structure of the future. Through the Data Fellowship, I've developed an actor mapping practice, Dot Insight, to enable the rapid surfacing of organisations and initiatives within a given system. My particular interest is in the use of mapping to help tackle strategic problems that require working together and a partnership approach for social development, sharing knowledge and common understanding of what exists and how they relate to each other. Most importantly, exploring where opportunities for collaboration might lie. For example, where are the initiatives supporting digital exclusion in London? Or how can we connect responsible and ethical tech practitioners across Greater Manchester? Or the breadth of organisations supporting the mental health sector? I'm passionate that mapping data can become a catalyst for change. The mapping process in itself convenes stakeholders that can network build together. I've been developing quite a mixed methods approach through the fellowship, which looks at data ethics and inclusion, bias around mapping data, community ownership and collective governance. And I look forward to sharing our work now, the Sense with Data.
Thank you all. Such fascinating areas of expertise and interests. And I also love how poetically you speak about data as well. It makes you feel very artistic about it. So Sense with Data, can you tell us what it is and how you all came to be part of this collective?
Yeah, so we kind of came together after the internal sharing for the Swigton Data Fellows that highlighted that we had this kind of overlapping interests in sense making, but then at the same time recognizing that we're all coming from kind of distinct backgrounds with different priorities. So our kind of challenge was, how do we navigate this overlap and find common ground without sort of smoothing out and making kind of, too generic. So we sat down, we talked about what we've learned, what we've read over the fellowship, and that evolved into part of the website as a repository for interesting things. So we've got a slide here. This is kind of just some visual flair. I'm not necessarily going to talk about the specific bits of content on here, don't worry about that too much. But yeah, on the left-hand side there, we can see there's sort of, using this tool called Notion, we set about to sort of collate interesting work that would come across over the year. And on the right-hand side, we've got some of the sort of visual thinking that we did at an early stage. We had this kind of idea of this sort of fragmented visual design. Coming back to, we wanted to find a way of building something that simultaneously we've got this kind of overlap, but also this distinction. So we had this kind of idea of data that is fragmented while still being kind of having this maybe like beautiful, cohesive, big picture. And that kind of has a parallel to how data can sort of, highlight a large scale pattern while also being random or fragmented at a small scale. And that kind of went into how we think about the content of the site. How do we build something that is simultaneously kind of chaotic and fresh while also being like ordered and readable in some way, right? So if we go to the next slide, we see some of that visual flavor for how we sketched out that common ground. So again, the content of this slide is not something I'm going to talk about too much here, but on the left-hand side, we have like the evolution of that work in Notion, drawing out through writing what our common purpose is. And on the right-hand side, we can see this example that was notated, written by Natasha, of a Venn diagram with the four of us kind of on it as our own spheres of interest, and our purposes as separate people, and then trying to sketch out where there are overlaps here. And this thinking, this combination of communicating using the written word, while also trying to simultaneously highlight divergent thoughts and overlapping thoughts, came through into what we actually delivered. So we came across this idea of sort of trying to do a sort of virtual panel discussion through writing and hosting that online. So I'm going to hand over to Natasha, who's going to talk about the different stuff that we've put on the website.
Okay, thanks, Alex. And thank you for building the website as well, which looks great. And it's been a really good part of this process, I think, to be able to develop the form and content of the site alongside the discussions that we've been having. So to have such a sort of close iterative process going on. So thank you. I'm going to have to give a very lightning tour of the website here. So I'd like to encourage you to, I think, click on the blue button to have a look at the website yourself. And also, I think there's another button where you can contact us to keep in touch in future if you'd like to do that. So this is the homepage. We're a collective of Sensemakers. As we've said, there are three main parts to the website: the content, which are questions, voices, resources, and about us section as well. And I should say that you can see the evolution of the Voronoi diagrams that Alex was saying, which is the sort of motif for the site, this blue background. So the questions, we are all about questions, questions, questions. And so this is our questions page where we show our sort of virtual panel. So we came up with some burning questions inspired by Rebecca Solnit's idea of breaking the story, really looking for the questions that we thought were burning questions in data. And if you go to this page, you'll see the discussion between the four of us, where we've really tried to interrogate some different ideas and provide an interesting base for people to dive into, have a look at that content and with links to other stuff as well. The voices section, we wanted to then extend this idea of questioning to involve other people. So we wrote up a brief called Data Voices. We've had some amazing contributions towards this, and a distinctive part of the site here is that there's different types of media, film and images as well as text, and that's really good to have a look at. And then finally is the resources section. So this is a real feast if you're interested in data. There's all kinds of stuff about sense making, collaborative processes, all kinds of great stuff to dive into. There's a whole load of links here to exhibitions and papers and so on. So please do have a look at that. And that's the end of my piece here. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. Thank you, Alex. And we encourage you, really do check out the website because you've got such a lot of resources and information on there. So it's really worth checking out. Pete, I'm going to ask you a question next, which is one of your burning questions on the website is data as material. Can you explain your interest in this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think most of us have a mediated relationship to data. That's the one of press yes, I agree, without really interrogating what we're agreeing to. And most of us are aware of how painless it is to let go of our kind of personal data through other channels as well. Seeing data as a material condition, maybe we could potentially speak to it in a different way. Although that's kind of a bit of a head scratcher and a bit of a chin wiggle, I've kind of struggled to get my head around it myself, kind of materializing data. How would you do that? Which is kind of odd because it's a real motivator for my relationship with data as a material. And this is kind of what drives much of my work in this area. So much of our time, I suppose, is driven by the relationships, properties, and movements of materialities. You know, that is the stuff in the world: carbon, microplastics, rare earth minerals, and the rest. And in all these things, we see material objects, their uses, their costs, their manufacture, their changing composition, and their characteristics. And this thingness, this kind of fascination, is mostly at the heart of modern debates about how time has been used overall, how it's been lived, how it's been valued. So what if we kind of saw data as a material? Say, if we did see data as material, maybe would our relationship to it change? If we consider that data is a counting mechanism at heart, and maybe the result of that counting is information that is usable and visible, we also can see that the process can be used to make something out of the gathering of that information, something that is useful, functional, and maybe beautiful. Products and services can be and are being used and designed differently because of this. But this is a process that uses those units to change, to make something in consequence to the information, like stacking building blocks, but slightly altering maybe how the stacking is done. Although we kind of also know that this can be porous, it can be used inappropriately. And we know it's kind of happening in a variety of ways. But maybe this is the architecture of data, the stuff that uses raw data and pushes it through a process, hopefully to get a better outcome. Maybe Natasha would be kind of good to jump in here, because maybe this is the beginning of the kind of tools for data, Natasha.
Yeah, I think data by itself is meaningless. It's a torrent, an ocean, too big, too fast most of the time. It's our intervention to frame it that brings meaning. And I think that tools are essential to be able to make sense of data. We could think of these as tools to work with a specific material, like a plane for working with wood. And it's interesting to think what these might be in terms of data as a material. If we think about data as a flow, and it is a dynamic living thing in a way, we can think about tools that might interrupt that flow, stop that flow, extract from it in order to make sense of it. So I think that's an interesting way to consider conceptually how we might think about that aspect of it. Another kind of tool would reveal patterns in data. Algorithms and neural networks are also good at this, but you and I, Pete, we've talked about the architect Christopher Alexander's pattern language in this respect, and the way that that methodology helps to distinguish and create meaning in urban design. So it seems to me there are tools for understanding data and there are tools for working with data. But as any maker will tell you, I know you're a maker, I'm a maker, you get to know a material by working with it as well. And that's why we're interested in this. So I'll hand back to you now.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with all those points. And I suppose if you consider data as a material, kind of malleable, expandable, recyclable, connectable, and delivered through an anthropocentric system, kind of that making system, that unearthing system, which identifies an age marked by, you know, all the bad stuff: global capitalism, nuclear development, rapid industrialization, urban sprawl, digital revolution. Could we start to treat data as, in an ideal world, maybe like microplastics? Should it be a particular sort of data? Should it have a limited life? Should it have governance and ethical considerations around its use? Should governments legislate against particular forms of data? Most of all, should humans play a bigger part in understanding the uses that it has? These are, for me, both the light and the dark of the data politic. And we certainly need a kind of viable and arguably urgent framework for thinking through it, and also the imperatives of long-lasting effects of our current views around data. And these need discussing in an inclusive, social, intersectional, human, political, and holistic ecological way. I mean, this, I suppose, in a way, is about kind of using deliberative processes, Natasha.
Yeah. I'll keep this bit brief because I can see the time. Something else I find interesting is the filtering and blocking effect of materials on data signals like sound or EMF and radio waves. And I've done some work on the materiality of signal blocking in the context of creating spaces for citizens to create deliberative processes, like in a citizens' assembly. To your point, thick concrete or solid metal will block Wi-Fi and mobile phone signals, but more appealingly, so will a structure wrapped in fine copper mesh, selectively blocking some frequencies while admitting air, light, and sound. It's interesting to think about this kind of signal-free analog space as a counterpoint to the always-on immersive data environment we inhabit. Stepping out or stepping back enables that critical position. I think I'll leave it there and pass on to Annie and Alex.
Thank you all. I'm sort of going to springboard off that to ask Annie a question here about, Annie, one of your interests, which is clear from the website, is data mapping and social value. So how can data mapping become a springboard for collective action?
Yeah, thanks, Jasmine. I guess my own interest is in understanding and surfacing what exists, the things that exist to help us make sense of a given field of study or system. And I guess in a way, it's simply a communication tool. I've got a quote here that I always like from Deborah Ancona, which says, "Sense-making is what helps us translate the unknown, chaotic and complex into something that can be understood, explained and drive shared action." And to me, that really kind of epitomizes, I guess, what I'm trying to do. The question around collective action is also really about exploring how the mapping outputs can be accessible to all, trusted by all and usable by all. And so how can we really democratize data so it is accessible but also understood? So one thing I've been exploring through the fellowship as well is different ways to surface the mapping data. There's obviously the kind of obvious tabular kind of data, spreadsheet type table views, but also narrative outputs and dashboards and visualizations, just to make sure that it is as inclusive as possible. And who and what is mapped is a huge topic in itself, and we've often been discussing this as part of the collaboration. And one of the discussions that often comes up is trust and governance. So I think I'll pass to Alex actually, because you often raise specific thoughts around trust and ownership that we've chatted about.
Yeah, so we have a really interesting conversation about this on the site. So I'll keep this kind of response sort of brief. I guess for me, this question sort of starts with, there's a really fine line when we think about systems and system mapping and data and sort of extracting information and knowledge from chaotic systems. There's a fine line there between being empowering and allowing for change to happen, and being kind of alienating, trying to sort of impose an order on things that are beautifully chaotic, right? The chaos is kind of the point. So I think it's a really interesting discussion. How do we sort of stay on the right side of that line? What are our principles, right? And I guess listening to others talk about data as material, the idea of living in data, makes me think of it's an alternative frame there. Can we step back and can we think about how would we consider this process of sense making if we were thinking about it in the physical world, right? And how do we transplant that into the digital world? What do we expect? What do we accept in the digital world that we wouldn't in the physical world, right? We have kind of enforced mediation of our interactions by commercial third parties. That's something that would raise an eyebrow, in other words, but it's kind of part of our digital realism viewpoint, right? That of course that's the way things are. And yeah, there's an interesting discussion there about how we break out of that kind of cycle.
Yeah, and I think it's yeah, I guess we're running a bit out of time. So having a look at the website, you'll see the discussion that went into all sorts of different places that we've got as one of our questions.
It's such a shame we've got such a short amount of time because this is just such a huge topic and there's a million avenues to go down, but the website has so much information on it. So yeah, I second that. Natasha, I wanted to come to you next because one of the key elements of the website is the voices of others exploring different aspects of data sense making. And you've labeled that data voices. Can you tell us a bit more about what that portion is?
Yeah, I'll just quickly introduce this and then we'll go on to introducing some of the actual voices themselves. So we wanted from the beginning to create a space for others to join the conversation and very much following the ethos of the project we've developed to be questioning, critical, open and curious and welcoming a diversity of work and perspectives. So the format for Data Voices has 3 parts: data and me, your relationship to data, which is an interesting one to think about. So I'd recommend it. It's quite difficult. The second one is introducing a work or project, something compelling, incisive or inspiring about data sense making was the invitation to our contributors. Can be your own or someone else's work. And then to ask a question, of course. So each of the data voices has asked their own question back to the group. So we've had 8 amazing data voice contributions, and I'll pass on to the others to talk about them.
I think it's over to me quickly. Yeah, we've been so lucky to be really throughout the fellowship to be surrounded by kind of just wonderful different voices, really. On the site so far, we've got kind of Annie Blanchett, who's kind of this beautiful kind of satirical project that uses scientific and colonialist tropes. Matt Baker, project seeking to interview nature writers in areas and environments that have covered their work whilst taking sub-second measurements of light and color from a very scientific perspective. Corinne Stewart, the engineer, who's kind of used datification and sense making of dreams, kind of fabulously kind of crazy. Michelle Forrest Beckett, the artist, a wonderful project that works with digital tools out of their usual context, just using it again as that material, using artistic means. Kathy Hind, audiovisual artist, listening, progressing, making data in the environment, some great stuff. Grace Quantock, psychotherapeutic counselor and the writer. You're working with clients who have intersecting marginalized identities. I mean, and just kind of wonderfully expanding the capacity to contain data and to process often overwhelming data experiences.
Yeah, and just to add to that, you know, all of those names were also data fellows, but also we've just come across through each of our study and research so much amazing work. So we've also got the work within the Voices section from Kate Swade, who has got an initiative called Digital Commons, a platform cooperative that's to support the solidarity economy. So really trying to get more of a commons approach through shared data, such as common land spaces. And Sam Howie Nunn, who's got an initiative called Understory, which is really fascinating. It's a sort of playable data and playable interfaces to enable communities to connect and really kind of build community data sets. And that's just a start. There's so much fascinating, so many fascinating voices that we hope to really kind of build our kind of connection to everybody else within the field.
Thank you so much. We're about a minute or so to the end of it, and I have to say this talk is just so enriching. It's sitting just on the edge of my comprehension. So, Alex, I'm going to hand over to you. Can you tell us about what's next for Centre with Data and how people can stay connected to the work that you guys are doing?
Sure. So there's some contact details on our site. So you can email us at hello@senseofdata.org if you want to reach out. We're looking to connect with people and expand our voices, as mentioned. There's also links to where we might post stuff on Twitter or Instagram. And yeah, we'll pop into the chat after this, so we'll be there if you want to ask any questions. But yeah, that's about it.
Thank you all so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed listening to this talk, and please do check out the website where there's tons more information and get connected to these wonderful folks. Thank you all.
Thanks so much, Jazz.
Thank you.